Hello and welcome to Negative Feedback. First of all, I'd like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. If you're in need of a website, a domain or an online store, make your next move with Squarespace. So in this video, we're going to be trying out some film photography at night. And this has been something that's been highly requested, and I kind of put it off because it's not something that I know too much about, so hopefully we can learn a bit about it together. So for this, I decided to pick up one of every type of portrait in medium format. So 160, 400 and 800, which I thought would give a good example of just the options you have and what the outcomes look like. So we're going to load up the 160 first and see what we can do. ISO 160. I'm also going to take another shot, just because I don't know how good that would be at f8. I'm also going to try at f16 just to get a bit more in focus. But this is where something funny comes in. So for this photo, this is going to need something that is called reciprocity failure, which pretty much means that after a certain amount of time, the film needs more light to expose at the same rate. So there is an app you can buy on your phone, which I have here, and it pretty much just calculates it for you. And you only really need to be worrying about this after 2 seconds normally. So this probably will be, so I'm going to calculate it, and it'll probably be a fairly long exposure. So if it was 8 seconds, that would be a 15-second exposure. Blimey! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to take another one just here, about 10 centimeters away from the last one, but pointing in the other direction. It's the same settings as last time, so another 15 seconds. F11, I'm going to say. 1 meter for there. F11, so that's 4 seconds. So I guess we'll load up the next film, which I'd guess would be 400. I've just loaded up the Portra 800, which will be pretty interesting to see how actually long the exposure times are, because it's considerably higher ISO than the 160 that I was first shooting. One second at f8. It's pretty easy. So time was running out as we were shooting the last roll, so I only managed to grab a few frames before we had to head home. Hence the lack of wrapping up or talking at this point. I thought it'd be great to quickly go over some of the things that are really important about shooting at night, and then some of my feelings towards what I experienced. So something I completely missed out is cable releases, which other than tripods are definitely your best friend in nighttime photography. Since you're more than likely to be performing exposures that are much longer than the timed ones on your shutter speed dial, you're going to need to use bulb, which is basically just holding down the shutter button for as long as you want to expose the photo for. The problem with this is that if you're doing it just with your finger, you're more than likely going to vibrate the camera a little bit, which normally results in some blur in the images because the camera has shaked and moved a bit. So this is where a mechanical cable release comes in really handy. It just screws into your camera and you press the button on the cable instead of actually on the camera. The other thing which is really important, and I definitely overlooked for a long time, is a good light meter. The darker it gets, the much harder it is to read light accurately, so your on-camera meter or your phone really isn't going to cut it when you're doing proper nighttime photography. So if it's something that you're really interested in, it's probably time to pick up a dedicated meter. For this video I was using the Sony L608, which is a spot meter and an incident meter. It's quite expensive, but it's really nice and I got it for a really good deal on eBay, so maybe just keep a lookout for them. But if that's a bit overboard for what you need, the Sony L308S Flashmate is really good and definitely a lot more affordable. So I shot the variety of all the film speeds. What did I think about them? So at the size of the scans that I got back, it's pretty hard to tell the difference between the grain and the sharpness between the three films. The Portra 800 is a bit more grainy, but it's really not something that would put me off too much. But the 160 and 400 are pretty much identical, so there wasn't as much benefit to shooting the 160 as I thought there would be. I was really hoping that the 160 could give me a really crisp and clean image with zero grain, but I was really surprised how well the 400 performed. However, one of the things that I really dislike about shooting at night is the weird flares that you get from your light sources, which is really hard to avoid when you're doing longer exposures. This would probably lean me towards shooting the higher speed film so that I could try and reduce the amount of flaring as much as possible, in the hopes that a shorter exposure would help it become less severe. One thing I think I would be interested in trying out is some other films, such as a tungsten balanced film, which could give a different look. You could either try Cinestill 800T or the old and discontinued Portra 100T. It'd be interesting to see how that would give a different spin on things with the different white balance. Or you could also try an extremely fine-grained film such as a slide film. You might come into some problems with extremely long exposure times, but hopefully the really clean, no-grain image could look really cool. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'd quickly like to remind you that issue 3 of Negative Feedback's magazine is now out for purchase, and you can find the link to the shop in the description. Also, the call for submissions for the print space exhibition are still open, and you can find out information about how to submit in the description. Finally, I'd like to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is an all-in-one easy solution to building a professional website to host your photographic portfolio, shop, blog, and much more. You can get 10% off your order using the code Negative Feedback, so definitely check them out. So thank you for watching, and I'm sure there'll be another video soon.